Thanks, Jean.
Thanks, Joyce. Hopefully everyone's got those changes. And in terms of the motions, they are as they stand. And like this morning's session, we'll try and get through as much business as we can. Okay, we're on motion 32. Going to call Mark Elwin from West Yorkshire to move it, and it will be formally seconded. Okay, over to you, Mark Elwin.
President Conference, Mark Elwin, West Yorkshire branch, moving motion 32. Firstly, let's be clear, this is not an anti-vax motion. It is not about conspiracy theories. This motion is about the huge ethical question of whether vaccine certification to access basic freedoms, such as going to a football match, going to a restaurant, catching a train, or having a job, has any justification in our society. A society that's gone from clapping to sacking healthcare workers. Firstly, is their introduction proportional to the threat? When over 79.6% of the population over 12 are already double vaccinated, what is the actual threat posed by an unvaccinated person? What percentage are the government actually looking for? Before the freedoms of millions are removed or not returned, then it must be demonstrated that it is proportionate and justified. Until now, normally, you had to have committed a crime to forfeit your basic freedoms and rights, not by refusing a medical procedure. This is a massive increase in the power and surveillance of the state. But employers actually need no legislation. No vax, no job has already been heard. And where does this stop? In Italy, all workers require COVID certification. In Israel, you require 3 jabs. How far do you trust your government? And let's be clear, their introduction not only is a major step towards a papers, please society, they create a 2-tier society. They have friendly names like Green Card or Freedom Pass. But essentially, they are about the vaxxed and the unvaxxed, the clean and the unclean. But whenever there are haves, there are have-nots. And hate, fear and discrimination goes with it. And we will do the government's job for them, by ostracising, criticising and insulting. Already we have the unvaxxed being singled out by people who should know better, selfish, COVIDiots, anti-vaxxers, conspiracy theorists. Perhaps the most concerning thing about COVID certificates is the discrimination element. Who will suffer most from their introduction? With all vaccine programs, there are different levels to take up within community, different levels of take up within communities. Historically, BAME communities have a far lower take-up of vaccines. The government is fully aware of this. On the 21st of October, the BBC reported the NHS figures. 72% of the black community had been vaccinated, as opposed to 94% of the white. 85% of those in the most deprived areas, as opposed to 95% in the least deprived. Around 70% of under 30s compared to over 85% of those over 60. So BAME communities, the most deprived communities and the young are the ones who will be and who are, where they've been introduced, now facing a new layer of discrimination. And are all these people crazy conspiracy theories? No, the reasons given are deep-seated mistrust of the government, communities marginalised by society and discriminated against are now expected to be unselfish and play their part to protect a society which has so far shown little or no interest in helping or protecting them. Others would rather wait and see if the vaccine is truly safe. Others quote childcare. Others worry about having time off work to have the vaccine or if they're made ill by the vaccine. Problems with transport. You might not agree with these, but they are not crazy, irrational reasons. They are rational, genuine concerns. Do you really improve trust by making these things mandatory? On the contrary, the evidence shows you make them worse. The one and only policy to try and achieve maximum take-up must be encouragement through engagement and facts, not by threats, coercion and exclusion. I've made some notes of what has been said at conference this week. Ordinary workers must not pay the price for COVID. We must address the growing inequalities of our society. Stop measures dividing working people, workplaces and communities. During the pandemic, Britain's billionaires increased their wealth by 106 billion, while in contrast, a record 2.5 million food parcels were given out. Do you think the introduction of COVID certificates will address that imbalance or make it worse? Please support.
Okay, thanks, Mark, for that. The motion's formally seconded. So motion 32 is open to debate. If you want to raise your hand, anyone who wants to come into the debate. Right, I've got no debate at the moment, so I'm going to call in Luke Elgar on behalf of the NEC. Luke?
Oh, yeah, thanks, Jane. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you. Thanks.
Cheers. Okay, thanks. Luke Elgar on behalf of the NEC to ask conference to oppose this motion, but in doing so, I think recognising the contentious points that this pandemic has brought to the fore for everyone, you know, at a time of sacrifice, you're going to have contentious points come forward. But none of us want to see further lockdowns or measures. And in fact, I think everyone's beyond exhausted with the pandemic. However, as a union who had to fight in our industries to further measures to protect our members and who led on calls to make the workplace as safe as possible sometimes against pushback from a company who deemed it too expensive to make our members safe, I don't believe now is a time to be making calls around banning any possible future measures. In fact, the qualified people across the world have stated time and time again that it's actually Tory inaction and delayed action which has led to further lengthier lockdowns. And I understand that this is a contentious issue and we have members who might support it, but we also have members who are vulnerable to the virus. We also have members who are rightly and cautiously still very concerned by the threat of COVID-19. And to pick up some of the points made in the motion, there are many laws and rules which could be interpreted as an infringement on people's liberties, thinking of things like seatbelts, thinking of things like drugs and alcohol rules that we have. But much of Europe is now using all of Europe is now using vaccine passports with success in holding back the virus. And secondly, I think on employment, the motion would see us calling on a ban on vaccine passports in workplaces such as care homes, where residents are at extreme risk. So while I support those workers' rights, I think it's more important that we're focused on backing care home workers in their fight against awful pay and awful terms and conditions. And in my opposition, I think I'll finish by saying this. We as a union must remain on brand that we support the fastest route back to normality, which remains through the vaccination. We're given vaccinations of babies. Smallpox was eradicated thanks to the vaccination programme back then. And to protect jobs and the economy and each other, we must be open to measures which may be crucial in the fight against the coronavirus. So thanks, conference. Please oppose.
Thanks, Luke. I've had two indications that they want. There's two speakers to come in. Shahid Sheikh, you're first to come on from Birmingham District. Cheshire number 1. I don't know who the person is on the screen, but you'll be in after Sheikh. Over to you.
Afternoon, Conference President Sajid Sheikh, Birmingham District MR, to support the motion. And my grandson support is I've already had the 3 vaccinations and I've got 1 more to have because I'm a kidney dialysis patient, and we were informed where people will have 2 and a booster. Kidney dialysis patients have to have 4. Where I dialyse, we have got patients, nurses who have not had the vaccination, and they have got their own reasons why they have not had the vaccination. I don't believe we should be supporting introducing of vaccination passports because it's wrong. Why do we need to have to go anywhere in this country or in any other country and prove that you've had the vaccination? Why can't you just accept if somebody says yes, they've had it, or no, they haven't? Why do we have to force people? And why should we support the government's idea about care home staff should have the vaccination to keep a job? As a trade union, we should be backing the care home staff to have a job, right? And not be forced to have a vaccination just to have that job. I've got a cousin who's in the care home. He hasn't had the vaccination, but that care home have kept him on, and they've had no issues through the whole of the pandemic. We're always going to have pandemics, some serious, some not serious, but we should not be taking people's human rights by saying you have to have a passport. And how can we actually believe what the government says? Because the government have told lies. They told everybody you have the 2 vaccines and COVID will be gone and you'll be okay. But people with the 2 jabs have still had COVID. And I know people who haven't had the jabs and not had COVID. It's about how you protect yourself, protect your family within the space you work in or you live in. It's basic things you have to do. It's not about you have to walk around with a passport. I support the motion.
Thanks, Sajid. We're going over to Cheshire number one, Robert Howells. Over to you, Robert, and then Ralph Ferris. If there's any more indications, get your hand up now.
Hi, it's Rob Howells, Cheshire number one. Can you hear me, first of all? Yeah.
Yeah, I can, Rob. Are you okay?
Yeah, I hear what people are saying, but as someone who's actually had it and was ill for 3 months with it and has ended up with a long-term condition because of it, I possibly have a slightly different view. I mean, we keep talking about rights and movement and human rights, but what about the human rights of the people that we're putting at risk? You know, vulnerable individuals. There's an LTB released this morning that's changing policy about going into care homes because of the legislation that's coming in. We can't guarantee that our members, staff, Royal Mail staff are actually vaccinated. So the policy has come out that we shouldn't actually enter the building because of that, because we're potentially putting them at risk. But I mean, it's also about caring for other people, isn't it? We talk about being socially responsible. Well, we need to be responsible for other people who are perhaps less able to protect themselves against it. And I mean, the reality is this thing isn't going away. This is going to be here for us for the long haul. We're looking at 5 years before we get the other side of this thing. And I mean, freedom of movement around the world is going to be based on vaccination because it's the only way you stop it. It's the only way smallpox was stopped. It's the only way diphtheria was stopped, was by the majority of people are vaccinated. If they're not, then the thing adjusts. I mean, the COVID-19 is SARS-CoV. It's a coronavirus. Common flu is a coronavirus. It adapts every year. And the only way you stop that is to reduce and reduce and reduce the pool that it's got to work in. And the more people that are vaccinated, the better. Yeah, there are some people who may have health reasons and it may affect them because of it. But I mean, generally those people are far and few between that are actually physically affected by it. I mean, what we have to be careful we do as a union is actually put out a clear signal, not a mixed message. I mean, we're going to be presented with this situation at the end of this week where a policy is coming into Royal Mail, but we don't go in. Well, how do we stand on that? How do we stand on supporting that? You know, we're going to give mixed messages to our members. So, I mean, I'm not trying to negate anything anybody said, but you have to look at it from the point of view of people who've suffered and members who have died because of this. It isn't the flu we're talking about. It's something that's really serious. And for some people, is fatal. So we really need to think about the bigger picture here, not just whether it's an infringement on our rights. And we feel that the deep state is taking over. Because in the end, no matter how incompetent this current government is, they're trying to protect people. And I mean, we need to look at the long term because, as I say, this isn't going to go away, is it? But I mean, like my colleague, our friend said, you know, for the people in the BAME community, it is a high risk. There are more people potentially who can be affected by it physically, and it could be dangerous for. But I mean, the more knowledge we have on that, the better, and to understand that and try and protect and come up with a better vaccine that isn't dangerous for people in the BAME community. It's just really sort of flagging that up. So we've got to look at the bigger picture anyway.
Okay, thanks, Rob. I've got Ralph Ferris from Plymouth and East Cornwall, and then Ricky Henderson. This is the last shout out for speakers. If you want to come in, put your hand up now. Over to you, Ralph.
Yeah, Jane, Chair Conference. I wasn't going to come in on this debate, but I do think some of the framing of the debate here has been wrong. So look, the thing about COVID, and in fact any infectious disease, is you're not only potentially a recipient of disease, but you're also potentially a transmitter. So the right situation, as the last speaker put out, isn't one of just a solely of an individual thing, of an individual's choice, of an individual's personal risk assessment. Because when you potentially can also transmit a deadly disease, then where we're actually at is what's called a competing rights situation. So your right to not have a vaccination that you don't want to have is in direct conflict of other people's rights to not be exposed to a greater viral load and a likelihood of catching a deadly disease. And the reason I put my hand up on this is listening to Shakey's contribution. I think it was from the heart and it was a good contribution. I think this has been a good debate. But when he said about care home workers shouldn't be forced to have the vaccine, my 93-year-old grandmother is in a care home. And even though she's been triple vaccinated now, the likelihood is, because of her state of health, if she gets COVID, she's probably going to die from that. And that's an unfortunate thing. When I went to visit her the other day, I had to jump through so many hoops to be allowed to go and visit her in the flesh for the first time in nearly 18 months. I had to prove my vaccination status, take lateral flow tests every day, do another lateral flow test when I was there, be completely covered in PPE equipment. And that's absolutely right, because her right to not die of a disease is more important than my right to be comfortable. And I'm going to make the point here that her right not to die of a deadly disease is more important than the right of a care home worker to choose to not have a vaccine and put her and the other residents at risk. So you may not think that that's the correct balance of the rights and responsibilities, and that's fine. That's what we're here to decide. But it's really, really clear that what we're talking about here is a balancing rights situation, not an individual's rights, because you can transmit a virus as well as get it. And we have to frame that decision correctly when we're making our mind up on this.
Okay, thanks, Ralph. Over to Ricky Henderson. Right, and before I get Ricky to speak, I'm just going to say I've got Dave Jones and Tim Pavlin, and they're going to be the last speakers on this session. Okay, right, over to you. Where are we?
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, Ricky, over to you.
Thanks, Jane. Ricky Henderson, Edinburgh, Dundee and Borders branch, to briefly oppose. I'm not sure I could make any better points than Ralph just has, so I shall be as brief as possible. I think Mark's quite right to highlight those communities and the cohorts of people that are likely to be excluded by passports and any other measures of compulsion. I think as a trade union, we should be very wary about measures to compel people to get the vaccine. But I think that has to be weighed against the risk of the virus and the fact that this is a public health measure. And not just in this country, but throughout the world. You know, everyone thinks about third world countries who will be crying out for access to this vaccine. I think we should do the responsible thing and try and encourage and support as many of our citizens as possible to take them. And within situations like this, we will always be measuring risk and balancing risk. And I think anything we can do to minimise the risk, particularly to vulnerable people, of getting struck by this horrible virus, then we should take every possible measure that we can. And I think finally what kind of swings it for me is that as a trade union, we act collectively, we believe in collectivism and society. And if we can take positive measures for the benefit of the wider society, both here and in other countries, then I think we should do so. So on that basis, we'll be opposing motion 32. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ricky. Dave Jones and then Tim Pavlin. Dave Jones from Wolverhampton and District. Okay.
Chair conference. I'm going to oppose this on behalf of my branch. I mean, one of the things is we're all trade unionists, and if basically you know, we took the option what a lot of people do and say, okay, I ain't going to join the union, but I'm still going to get my pay rise. That's what we call people. You know, we call them names. We call them. I'm not going to say the names, but I see this as a similar situation where we've all got a duty to get the world, not just the UK running again. We got the world. We've got to get the world running. You know, okay, this has been okay these last few days. But do you not think it's a lot better when we're at conference and we're all face to face and we're all meeting each other? Now, if we all decide to be selfish and say, right, I don't want to take the vaccine for my own personal reasons, we would never get out of this situation. So on the grounds of, I think we've all got a duty to get ourselves out. Nothing political about this. I think it's basically just that everybody has a duty in society to get ourselves out of this awful situation. So I oppose.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Over to Tim. There's been opposition, so we'll be bringing Mark back in on the opposition.
Right.
You're right, Tim.
Okay, yeah. Cheers, Jane. Chair Conference, Tim Pavlin, Eastern Number 4 branch. Now, I wasn't down to be on this session, but I was interested in the motion, and I'm all rise to support it. I think there's so much misinformation on the vaccine, and we've got to be careful that we're not acting too quickly, because it is a trial vaccine. It hasn't been in existence for a huge amount of time. And I think there are still a lot of people who are not anti-vaccine, but are certainly vaccine hesitant. And I think we've really got to be aware of the fact that we must retain that choice. It is democracy, it is human right, that we should be able to have that choice whether we want to have a vaccine or not. Now, there's certainly vulnerable people, and I would certainly expect them to have the vaccine. There's people who will want to have it by choice, but there's people who wouldn't want to have it by choice. And by creating a vaccine passport, you're taking away that choice. Now, the other misinformation, as far as I'm concerned, is that the vaccine doesn't stop you catching the virus. It doesn't stop you spreading the virus, but it does help to lessen the effects. And so, again, I think that most people have a fairly good immune system, and maybe they want to trust in their own immune system to be able to ward off any viruses which may come along. And there's certainly through exercise and taking vitamins, supplements, good diet will certainly help you on that line. So I do think that for certain parts of society, it will be good for them to have that vaccine. But I think for certain other parts that they should be allowed to have that choice. And so for that reason, I'm going to support the motion. And thanks very much for your time.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Right, I'm going to go back to Mark Alwyn, West Yorkshire, for the right to reply because there's been opposition. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for all contributions. It was a subject I think needed debating. It's going to be, there's a lot of points to reply on, so I hope you can bear with me, and I hope if necessary I can get a short extension. The NEC opposition and some others were that compared it to seatbelts. Seatbelts were introduced after a huge amount of evidence that the compulsory wearing of it would save lives, and also after a lot of debate over many years. The vaccination, there is evidence that vaccination reduces transmission and infection, but there is not evidence that certification and forcing people to have the vaccine will hold back the COVID. And that's something that was said. It's the certification that's holding back COVID infection. There's no evidence for that. It's the vaccine that's holding it back. We've had people say COVID kills. It does. No one is denying that COVID is a dreadful disease. Flu kills, not in the numbers that we've seen with COVID, I admit, but we don't certificate against every disease, every infectious disease that may kill people. It's not it's not something that should be compared. And the other opposition from the NEC that the union's can't be seen as being anti-vax. If you listen to the motion, when I move the motion, this is not about being anti-vax. I've had the vaccine. I've had COVID. I've had 3 jabs. It's not about being anti-vax. It's about that choice and bringing in such legislation that is so serious that it will restrict people's freedoms, and not just generally, but certain parts of our society, certain communities will be hit harder than others. And is it justified based on what the previous speaker just said about transmission rates? Yes, we know there's a slight increased transmission rate if you've not had the vaccine, and obviously an increased chance of getting the disease. But to bring in such severe restrictions to the whole population, it's got to be justified. And so far that hasn't been done. We've talked about we've got to see the bigger picture. Yes, we should see the bigger picture. The bigger picture is about what will be the other effects on society. Where is this likely to lead to? it'll be a lot easier for governments to say, right, well, let's not bother worrying about the winter crisis, which happens every single year. Let's just bring in more certification for flu and everything else. Let's put responsibility onto the society, and we can sit back and not put in the measures in the NHS that we need. So don't think the government will stop here. This was a 2-week lockdown a year and a half ago, and look where we are now, bringing in a certification to restrict people's freedoms. We've talked about, a lot of people in opposition said, yeah, we've got to convince people. That's what this is about. Convince people, encourage them, really encourage as massive take-up of the vaccine as possible. But coercion and blackmail is not the way to do it. We've heard about healthcare workers possibly being selfish. Maybe an argument could be made for healthcare workers, but it's a huge step to sacking them without the soundest of arguments, not by a knee-jerk, ill-thought-out, poorly debated legislation. And let's weigh that against the possibility that 60,000 care workers and care home workers could lose their jobs in just a few days. That's 1 in 5 members of the social care workforce are Black or Asian or from ethnic minorities. Is no vax, no job really informed consent? I would say it's not. COVID kills, but poverty kills, and this will exacerbate the poverty. Let me take you back to day 1, motion 1 of this conference, which you passed unanimously. The very last line: tackle all forms of injustice through the power of our collective strength. All forms. Now, if we really mean that, if we don't want certain sections of our society even further penalised, even further feeling separate from the rest of society, then why did we pass that 2 days ago? Don't judge by words, judge by actions. And the action now should be to support this if you really meant what you said on the motion 1. So please support the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I'm going to put motion 32 to you. So can you please get voting on your voting apps on motion 32? While we wait for that vote, just to say motion 33 will be moved by Ben Shafto, and I know Trish Follins has said it's be formally seconded. If there's a change to that, Trish, can you let me know on the chat box? Okay, Trish, I've got that. You'll be seconded the motion 33. Thanks, Trish. Right, everyone. I've got the vote back on motion 32. Total votes cast was 162,387. In favour of the motion, there was 47,531. Against the motion was 112,351. Therefore, motion 32 is not carried. We now move on to motion 33, standing in the name of Tyne and Wear Clerical. I believe it's Ben Shafto to move and Trish Follins will be seconded. Ben?
Hi, Jane.
Hi, you all right, Ben? Over to you to move.
Cheers. Good afternoon, everyone. President Conference, Ben Shafto, Tyne and Wear Clerical, moving motion 33. Conference, this motion had previously been unanimously carried at the Young Workers Conference, and we know it had overwhelming support in advance of the 2020 General Conference that unfortunately didn't go ahead because of COVID. The sentiments of this motion were important pre-COVID and have never been more important now. We've experienced the additional pressure COVID has introduced to our working lives. I don't need to remind you that millions of people are suffering emotionally as a consequence of the coronavirus pandemic. The professionals have already concluded there's a growing mental health crisis in the UK. Data from the Office of National Statistics this May revealed that depression rates have doubled since the pandemic began. We know access to mental health care is in decline, and this will have long-term implications on mental health and put even greater pressure on health services. The HSE says employers should provide adequate and appropriate first aid equipment, facilities, and people so employees can be given immediate help if they are injured or taken ill at work. Conference, what if someone takes ill at work through mental ill health? Shouldn't they also be entitled to first aid and support? As we, with other like-minded organisations and celebrities, do our best to combat the old-fashioned stigma associated with mental health, we feel we could do more to recognise how vital mental health first aiders are to a workplace and the benefit this provides. Now we need to show our members we take mental health seriously, and we need to unanimously carry this motion to get the campaign started. Thank you. I move.
Okay, thanks, Ben, for moving that. Seconded, Trish?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Patricia.
Oh, I sit down as Patricia. Sunday name. Thanks. President Conference, Trish Follins, West Yorkshire branch, to second motion 33. Our branch welcomes the work that's being carried out by our education department, which has provided course around mental ill health for some time now. And more recently, we've seen the accredited mental health first aid programme, and there's also been the creation of the regional disability leads under redesign. All of this is good progress, but we feel that we could do more as a whole union, and I feel it's the right time and this is the right motion. As Ben has already pointed out, the pandemic has exacerbated many already at breaking point services. We also need to consider the impact of austerity, which is contributing to the ever increasing workplace stress, therefore the increase of mental ill health. During this conference, we've had many examples of around how members have suffered of late, and this is a clear indication of why we need to try and protect our members when it comes to mental ill health. And therefore, this should be at the forefront of the union's action plans. As the motion states, currently there are no legal requirements to have designated mental health first aiders in the workplace. By asking the NEC to work with external bodies, which does include the Labour Party, to campaign the HSE, we move towards undertaking a review of health and safety within workplaces and with a programme more applicable to today's society. Conference, please support.
Thanks, Trish. Right, motion 33 is open to debate. If people can indicate, put their hands up. Okay. Right, we've got quite a few up. Start with Llewellyn Moss from South Yorkshire. Over to you. And then Jan James.
Well, afternoon, President Conference. I stand to support this motion. As a union, we have a lot of momentum behind us in putting this issue at the forefront of mental health. It all, well, I wouldn't say it all started ago, but 4 years ago, a commission was studied by the government indicating best practices, but that seems to be about as far as it has gone in terms of legislation and all that sort of stuff. We don't have a lot for our health and safety reps to really latch onto and to hold businesses to account for. We do have a bill slowly making its way through Parliament to get mental health first aid more into the workplace, but we need to push on other fronts to make a difference. In 2017, this report showed that 300,000 people lose their jobs every single year due to mental health, and we have 50% of people at work showing symptoms of mental health issues. Just to remind everyone how important this is, we need to have a sense of urgency about empowering people to get the help and support that they need. These recommendations really aren't enough. People are suffering, people are still dying. The HSE and government have been sluggish, and we need to demand it makes changes to keep up the pressure. I would say this is one small facet of an overall issue, but an important one. Making sure more people are properly equipped to help those who need it, we will save lives and improve many others. A quarter of us will likely benefit from that kind of help this year as a quarter of us will have a mental health issue. Please support this motion. Thank you.
Thanks very much. We're going to take Jan James, South Wales branch, and then Gary Clark, Scotland, number 2. And then I've got a further 2 speakers. And can I encourage, if you want to come into the debate, put your hands up now so I can judge the length of the debate. Over to you, Jan.
Thank you. Chair, Conference, Jan James, South Wales branch. In the workplace, there is still a great deal of ignorance around mental health issues. Many people are uncertain how to recognise mental illness and unsure about how to react when faced with it. They might unconsciously show stigmatising behaviours and attitudes. So educating on mental health awareness is paramount in combating this ignorance. Those in need of mental health support do always not receive it from their employers. By becoming more informed and aware, it would be beneficial to be able to spot the signs and symptoms of mental health issues and provide the right support more easily. Someone with poor mental health may not realise it. Even if they do, they may be reluctant to seek help or might not know where to turn to for support. So, what is mental health first aid? Mental health first aid is spotting the signs and symptoms of common mental health issues, providing non-judgmental support and reassurance, guiding a person to seek professional support. Provision of care within the workplace is not intended to replace professional mental health care or therapy. The mental health first aid courses do not enable an individual to act as a mental health professional, such as a therapist or a psychiatrist. It's in businesses' interest to have a mental health first aider, as people might not always feel comfortable talking to their manager about mental health. Having support at work means they can stop a mental health issue from getting worse and aid a faster recovery. Training people in mental health awareness and skills to deal with mental health issues at work helps to build an open and supportive culture around mental health. Our employers should be treating mental health in a similar way to physical health by having as many first aiders for mental health as for physical health. Therefore, we support this motion wholeheartedly.
Okay, thanks, Jan, for that. Gary Clark, Scotland, number 2. You there, Gary? We can't hear you. Gary, is the sound on? Gary, I'll come back unless you do it in the next minute. I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you while you'll fix your sound. I'm going to go over to Steve Watkins, Kingston area. Steve.
Hi, Jane.
Hiya. Go on, over to you.
Yeah, Steve Watkins, Kingston area branch, in full support of motion 33. As a union rep from my office, I've dealt with mental health issues more than any other issues, health issues in the office, and the managers are giving attendance ones, twos, without ever thinking of the consequences of the mental health issues they're actually facing. This issue has not been raised in the workplace very well to management. And what we need to do is not only get over to our union side, but over to the management side, because they're issuing attendance ones and twos. And we're actually fighting back with grievances. We've got outstanding grievances at the moment due to mental health issues that have not been looked at properly. And this is a serious issue in the attendance procedure, because people can't be off with a severely mental health issue and do nothing about it and get issued an attendance one, and then have to go to attendance free to appeal to say so. So I'm all for this motion. We need to do more for our union reps to get them educated in the Mental Health Act, because we are under a severe pressure at union level, reps level, to know more about mental health, because a lot of us do not know the severity of the situation with mental health. We are very amateur at it because it's such a broad spectrum of issues now. So we need more information. Thank you. We support.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Gary, back to Gary Clark. Apparently you're on sound, so it must be your end that's not producing the sound. So speak again, see if we can hear you at all. No, because they've come on from the tech team that you're not muted, but they can't hear you either. So I'm going to move on to Nigel Bailey. Keep trying. It must be some setup, how you've got it set up. It's not picking you in the room up. Okay, over to you, Nigel Bailey.
Thank you, Jane. Nigel Bailey, South East Anglia branch. I can't really say how disappointed I am that this motion is on the pad. We've been talking about this for years and years. Not only at general conference, but industrial conferences, at local level.
Sorry, I didn't. Well, anyway, I think that was a mistake what I've just seen. But anyway, carry on, Nigel.
Sorry about that. Yeah, we've been discussing this at various conferences over the years, and locally as well. And we still don't seem to be getting anywhere. So I'm not disappointed that it's on the pad, because we are going to support it. I am disappointed that we're still having to talk about it, and things like this should have been in place many, many years ago. So with that, please support this prop, and let's get something done. Keep chipping away at the society that seems to think that people with mental health don't seem to need support. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thanks, Nigel. Right, we're going to try Gary Clark again. If we can send him the mic. On the Scotland number 2, I think they've got 2 links open now.
Do you hear me now, Jane?
I can hear you now, Gary.
Right,
carry on.
Right, thanks, Corbett, for bearing with me. And I think this is one of the most important motions on the pad. Motion which every branch will be impacted on, and I do want to touch on a few examples, some really disturbing examples what's happened in my branch over the last couple of years. Don't know if Connor's aware, but my branch has actually suffered 4 members committing suicide in the last 2 years. And on that, we have had 31 trained reps on mental health awareness, and we've now started training people on mental health first aid with the help of Steve Jones and the department and headquarters. Now, on that, as a branch secretary, somebody's had to write 4 death grants for 4 members committing suicide. That puts a lot of pressure on members in the branch, puts a lot of pressure on reps who've had members actually take their own life. And on the fact that every one of the 4 members we lost tragically over the last couple of years, all were male, all were aged between 30 to 50, and all died in really tragic circumstances. One was actually a former rep we had to deal with, as he sadly took his own life. And what was quite attitude towards Royal Mail, when we looked at doing mental health first aiders as a trial in our branch, Royal Mail actually said to the CWU, we don't believe there's an issue of mental health in Scotland #2 because the facts do not correspond that when many people actually all sick with actually mental health issues. I responded to that, well, there's no facts actually coincide with there's no issue inside this branch area. How does 4 lives mark as a matter of fact? How does the death rate of people taking their own lives amongst males run at 110 per 100,000 people when it's over that's over 10 times the national average? So this is a very vital motion for as our branch is concerned. Motion we will hopefully be carried unanimously because it does impact on every single branch in this country. Impacts of people saying through the conduct attendance procedure with members getting disciplined, impacts on reps dealing with these issues day-to-day basis, which impacts on every single member in us. So I hope the conference supports us unanimously, and let's take this forward and let's show if the employers are not taking this seriously, us as a trade union must take this 100% seriously. So conference, please support.
Thanks, Gary. I'm now going to move on. Simon Maxwell, South Central.
Chair, conference, hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you fine, thanks.
Excellent, thank you. I'll just rise a South Central Postal rising in support of the motion, and I think we need to go one further and make it a legal requirement to have mental health first aiders in the workplace. And then this would absolutely stop employers just paying lip service to this and actually be taken seriously. It affects more than people, 1 in 4. So I wholeheartedly support and thank you, conference, and I urge everybody else to do so.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Now over to Robert Howells, Cheshire #1. And unless there's anyone else who puts their hands in, I'll be calling in Erin Bress on behalf of the NEC after Robert. Over to you, Robert.
I just really wanted to rise in support of this motion and really draw attention to the brilliant work that's been done already by the union. There was, I don't know if people remember, about a year ago, well, probably more than that now because we've not had a conference for a while, a couple of years back, we voted to develop our own mental health training framework, which we did, and we trained up, I think it was 12 trainers. I went on one of the initial courses, which I'll be honest was excellent. It was run by Jamie in the Northwest. His name escapes me at the moment.
Jamie
McGovern, and one of his colleagues, and very, very good, very informative, done at a level where you could really understand what's going on. I've already been putting it into use at work. I know there was a plan at that point to expand it in the longer term, and I think that would be a really positive move, would be to expand the number of trainers to enable more people. I know initially they were only training reps, and I think we need to consider, if people are willing to put themselves forward to be trained as mental health first aiders. I mean, the ideal situation for me would be to have someone on every shift. I mean, we've got sort of 4 shifts in our office, and there's only me, so I can't be everywhere. But it would be great to be in a position where we could do that and have someone on each shift and know that there's someone there. And I think, it's something they need to consider long term. The mental health has become a major issue in the working environment now, and we need to look at whether it should be treated in the same way as the statutory requirement for first aid. But I think, one of the things we could do as a union, as we've already started to do, is lead the way, to put Royal Mail to shame and say, well, look, that's the problem. Here's the solution. What are you doing about it? We're stepping up to the plate. Why aren't you? But I mean, it is a really serious issue. And I mean, we're having now we're going through a major revision in our office. We've had a structural revision, and it's added already to the pressure that's going on. We're in a high volume state at the moment before we even go into the pressure period, and people are buckling under the pressure of it. And managers just don't see mental health as real illness. They just do not understand that simply by changing their approach to people, they could take pressure out of the situation. And it's really something only we need to push Royal Mail to raise far up the agenda. They talk a great talk, Royal Mail. There's a lot of material. I mean, I'm a mental health ambassador within Royal Mail as well, but there's a lot of talk, but not a lot of action on the shop floor. It doesn't seem to filter through to the people dealing with our members, and that needs to change. You know, it needs to become a key point within the company. But I mean, I just really want to raise, attract attention to the good work that the union has put into it already, and that we need to carry on and expand that.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Right, as I said, I'm going to bring Aaron Brett in on behalf of the NEC. There's been no opposition to the motion, and then after Aaron, I'll put the motion 33 to the vote. Okay, over to you, Aaron.
Thank you, Chair Conference. Aaron Brett on behalf of the National Executive Committee to support motion 33. Let's start with a couple of statistics, shall we? 1 in 6 people will experience mental health problems in the workplace within our life. And evidence also suggests that 12.7% of all sickness absence days in the UK can be contributed to mental health. Now, that being said, the majority of us here are lucky enough to work for companies where the business's stance on mental health is changing due to the work that we've been putting in. You can see this with the introduction of CWU mental health first aider training, as well as the agreement with Royal Mail to train managers and reps in mental health first aid. Since 2018, the CWU have campaigned to make it compulsory to have a mental health first aider in the workplace by getting involved in the Where's Your Head At campaign, which was led by Natasha Devon. And updates are still being provided via the LTBs. Our work does obviously still continue on this, and we want to continue this work because we know how important it is. Being someone who personally struggles with mental health, I am 100% behind this motion. It's not easy leaving everything at the door like we're told to when we go into the office. And I am one of the lucky ones where I am able to ask for the support from the business and from the union if I'm struggling. And if I'm completely honest, I couldn't imagine not having the support that we do. Everyone has the right to feel safe in the workplace with health and safety laws, which protects them physically. We need something in place to make sure that they're protected mentally. And that's why we're asking conference to wholeheartedly support this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Right, as I said, there's been no opposition, so no right to reply. I'll put motion 33 to the vote. If you could all vote, please, that'd be great. Right, the next motion that will come up after the vote will be motion 34, which I believe Winston is moving and John Humphreys seconded. There's been a lot of messages about this, so if I've got it wrong, let me know. But it's Winston Richards moving and John Humphreys seconded. Right, Winston, I haven't called you yet. I was just making sure you knew that motion 34 was up next. It won't be called until after the vote. So that's why you can't unmute. You'll get a message in a bit. I just wanted to clear that I have got the right 2 people. Hopefully you've all voted and there's not been an issue. Always on the last part of a conference, whether virtual or face-to-face, there's always last-minute scrambles and issues, etc. and changes. And just hopefully we can get as much business as we can get done. Right, I've got the result now. Right, in terms of total votes cast, 163,078. In favour of the motion, 161,362. Against the motion, 1,716. Therefore, the motion has been carried. Okay, now moving on to motion 34. I believe it's Winston Richards to move and John Humphreys from London Postal to the second.
Right. Good afternoon, President.
If you let me know, Winston, when you're...
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, Winston, I can.
Right,
Thanks.
fantastic.
Yeah, I'm all sorted now. Go on, over to you.
Right. Good afternoon, President Conference. Winston Richards, Greater London Combined Branch, moving motion 34. Telecoms is an essential service and it should be a public utility run for the common good. COVID-19 crisis has highlighted the urgent need for universal access to broadband services. However, all the major telecoms firms seem to prioritise returns to their shareholders rather than to invest and develop the services that customers need. This competitive...
I'm sorry, the mics are very sensitive, so we can hear background stuff going on. So I don't know whether anything could be done about that. Sorry about that. I just thought it is interrupted. So you carry on speaking, not a problem. Just be mindful of it for me.
Yeah. This competitive model of regulation has led to outsourcing, cost-cutting, site closures, and permanent skilled jobs exported abroad. Furthermore, this competitive model has led to downward pressure on pay and conditions for us as workers in the industry. Whilst it delivers mega profits for those leading companies where our members work. Only a publicly funded, publicly owned and accountable infrastructure can provide the telecom services that support the public sector and the wider economy. During the pandemic, we have seen how the digital divide that results from market liberalisation and private ownership has affected the lives of working class people. From children struggling to do their lessons remotely, to housebound and older people expected to access benefits and social services online. For their sake and for our own, we need to take forward our union policy. It could all be so different. We could be freeing up the real potential of new technologies to tackle class inequality by prioritising improved access for those isolated and vulnerable, and to bring our communities closer together to build a new collectivity for the 21st century. We could ensure that everyone is entitled to high-speed access with decent IT equipment that allows them to work and learn from home. Also allows us to connect with others in their communities, as well as access vital local services. We could also have job security and quality training for the next generation of telecom workers. We could also be using technologies to deal with local environmental concerns and to provide the digital inclusion necessary for a just future and to boost the local economy and all living standards. We need to build on the commitment given by the Labour Party in the 2019 general election campaign. The commitment was that there would be public ownership of broadband infrastructure, a need to come together with other youths to make the case for public ownership, not just of telecoms, but of post and other universal basic services such as energy, water, and transport. Public ownership must be part of any new deal for workers. Conference, please support the motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Winston, for moving the motion. I'm going to go to the seconder, John Humphreys, London Postal Engineering. Over to you, John.
Thanks, Jane. Right, hang on.
You okay?
I've got another message on my screen, sorry. Right, I'll start. President, Conference, in seconding this motion, we recognise that motion 30, which called for the CWU to take a lead in organising campaigns and industrial sectoral conferences to include all stakeholders, was accepted by the NEC. So motion 34 highlights how the digital divide encapsulates all the invidious inequalities that exist in our society and highlights the disadvantages seriously affecting different groups purely because of their inability to access quality broadband connections. There are already community groups and civil society organisations supporting those affected by the digital divide. And we need to be part of that process. We need to help lead the campaigns, in particular free broadband, and also, as per motion 30, take the lead in working towards sectoral conferences and a unified campaign. That's the goal. The community campaigns can help us build longer term alliances and help us achieve what could and should be common goals, which we've already discussed. Importantly, the motion also underlines the need for democratic public ownership, where telecom workers, the unions, customers, community organisations play key roles, along with other stakeholders, in overseeing industrial strategies at board level for those industries and those businesses. It also reinforces the approach we need to take to ensure that the Labour Party, from CLP level upwards, continues to support the public ownership policies laid out in the 2019 manifesto. I second.
Okay, John, thanks very much. Motion 34 is open to debate. If anyone wants to raise their hands, I'll call you in. Right, if people can raise them so I can get a judge of how many. Right, we've got Steve Phillips, first speaker into the debate. Steve.
Yes, afternoon, Chair, Conference. Steve Phillips, CCTV branch. We'd like to fully support this proposition. I mean, because as the motion states, the Labour Party manifesto 2019 made it clear the commitment to public ownership is a no-brainer as far as we're concerned. I mean, broadband, all the infrastructure, water, energy companies should be under public ownership. I mean, the last couple of months have highlighted the problems with the energy companies and the water companies releasing sewage into the rivers and the sea unregulated. Energy companies going bankrupt. The companies, our government's having to step in and back them up, keep them afloat. I mean, it's a joke, really. It's a no-brainer. So we fully endorse this. I'm old enough to remember when stuff was under public ownership. I'll be showing my age there, but I think things were a lot better. We fully endorse that. We also like to say, I think Openreach should be under public ownership. Wouldn't have half the problems we got, obviously, with dealing with them. And it would endorse their members. It would protect their members' terms and conditions. Recent poll, 60% of Tory voters even thought that water companies should be under, and energy companies under private ownership. Public ownership. So we'd like to fully endorse this. We'd like to get back to them sort of manifesto commitments that would secure the terms and conditions of our members. So fully support that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Is there anyone else on debate? No, I'm going to bring in Andy Kerr, Deputy General Secretary, Telecom and Financial Services. Over to you, Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. Thanks, President. Just on this motion 34, I think the first thing I should say that you announced at the beginning of this session, Jane, that we have changed our view on this from one of remit opposed to support, and we are supporting this motion. And we did that because we agree with lots of the sentiments in the actual motion. Though some of the wording we had a bit of an issue on, but really on balance, there's much more unites us in the motion than actually divides us. So that's why we sort of changed our view to support. So we are, very, very much supporting it, if you like. And the current policy, and Winston will know this because it was his branch's motion, was carried in motion 33 2018 conference. And in that motion called from a commitment from Labour on public ownership within the telecom industry. An important word there was within the telecoms industry. This motion does actually go a bit further. It can be interpreted as saying the whole of the sector, and that is really problematic in lots of ways. And basically on cost and on other issues. If you take all the telecom sector in the whole of the UK, it would be very difficult to do that. But again, back to the motion itself, there's three main instructions in the motion. To campaign for strategic planning and long-term public investment. Yes, we certainly support that completely, and everything that was said from John and from Winston regarding the pandemic and where we come out of it, especially working with communities. And you've heard earlier in this week, our involvement in communities is going to be much more in the future. And we do see that the telecoms industry has been a real factor in that and tackling the digital divide. So yes, absolutely supportive. And the second one, job security and direct labour, absolutely, we support that, and we will be arguing the case, as we are not just in the UK, but it's actually further afield in Europe, actually, about the sector-wide standards and paying conditions. So again, totally supportive of that, and we're part of our campaign. But I'll just finish off in the last part, and touching on what people have said about the 2019 manifesto. The 2019 manifesto didn't come about just by the sake of it. It came about partly in main with the CWU's involvement to it. Both the General Secretary, Dave Ward, and myself, David Bowman and Andrew Towers, were heavily involved with John MacDonald in formulating the policy the Labour Party put forward. So we did carry out motion 33, and we did achieve it. Maybe not all in part, but we weren't successful in that election. And the issue for us now in this, and then we do support completely the words in here, building on that 2019 manifesto, the commitment to public ownership. We do and will argue that case at the National Policy Forum and every other policy forum we can. I personally chair the Economic and Business and Trade Policy Commission at the moment for my sins, and I will be promoting it, as I did work alongside John MacDonald as a co-chair of that. We'll continue to do so, and we will promote our policy at regional Labour conferences and wherever else we can. But the issue for us at the moment is we have got a problem, and the problem doesn't come as any shock to anybody. It's called the current leadership of the Labour Party, and I can assure you, the current leadership of the Labour Party, or some of them, do not want to keep this as a policy. So we are going to be arguing, and we are going to have to fight. And Dave, myself, and others, at every opportunity, will have to fight to maintain that policy in that manifesto. But you have got the commitment, certainly from our executive and others. We will continue to make the argument for public ownership of the telecoms industry, or the parts of the industry back into public ownership. We will do that. We'll continue to do that. So I ask you all to wholeheartedly support this motion, and hopefully it goes through unanimously. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Right, there's been no opposition, so there's no right to reply. So I'm going to put motion 34 to the vote. So if you can get on your vote apps, hopefully Judy Griffiths, you've found your app now for voting. Right, after motion 34, we'll be taking motion 35. And I've got down here, mover John Carr and seconder Robbie McLeaf. So you no doubt will give me the proper Scottish pronunciation of that name. That's my best attempt at the moment, and on the last section of the agenda. So we'll wait for the vote and then we'll move on to motion 35. Thanks, comms. I believe Judy's been sorted on the vote now. And I would like to thank all the headquarters staff who've made this possible. It's new ways of working for a lot of us, etc. We've had to get on with it, but it's big, you know, it's been a big task, and I'd like to thank everyone for being able to pull it off, but build upon what we've done previously in terms of virtual meetings and briefings. So yeah, it's been a pleasure to chair the sections, but also I think it's worked really well. As I keep saying, the voting has got quicker and quicker. So thanks everyone, to all the people dealing with the votes. I'm looking at SOC. I'm also thanking the SOC as well for all their hard work and adapting to new ways of working. Thank you very much, everyone. Right, I've got the votes here in terms of motion 34. Total votes cast 153,794. In favour 153,358, and it comes up as no votes. It just means it's below a certain level in terms of no votes against. So the motion 34 is carried. I'd just like to thank everyone who sent me nice private messages that apparently I'm doing okay at chairing the virtual conference. So thanks everyone for that. But like everyone else, I don't know, it's still stressful whether it's virtual or in the flesh. So we're now on motion 35, standing in the name of Highland and Mal, John Carr to move. Again, the normal procedure will be let people move and second, and then we'll open the debate. You can get your hands up then, okay? So it's now over to John. John, are you there?
I am there, yes, hi.
Okay.
Hi,
you're right.
Yep, I'm fine, thank you. How are you? Good, right. I'm John Carr, Highland and Mile Political Officer. This is my first conference and my first speech, and I'm rising to move motion 35. This motion is all about the democratic rights of Scottish people for self-determination. The Scottish TUC 2021 conference voted overwhelmingly to support the democratic right of Scottish people to choose the way that they want to be governed. They went further and actually backed a second referendum. Unfortunately, not the CWU delegation, who under advice from HQ opposed the motion, resulting in a Scottish CWU delegate having to withdraw from the Congress. The CWU was defeated on this issue and are now one of the few unions not backing a Scottish referendum. The 1989 claim of right was supported by every Labour MP and Liberal MP, MSMP, bar one, including the likes of Gordon Brown, Alistair Darling, Menzies Campbell, and Charles Kennedy. The Scottish referendum in 2014 was won by the Unionists through lies, media distortion, and anti-independence propaganda on a massive scale. After the referendum, the Smith Commission report of 2016, an all-party report on further devolution, section 18 stated categorically, it is agreed that nothing in this report prevents Scotland from becoming an independent country, should the people of Scotland so choose. As far back as 1953, Lord Cooper, a Scottish judge, ruled that people are sovereign, not Parliament. So Starmer and Johnson have no basis for blocking independence. The right to self-determination is also fully supported in the United Nations Charter, Article 1 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. All countries have the right of self-determination. And then came Brexit. 62% of Scottish voters were against leaving the European Union, and their wishes have been ignored. That isn't democracy. That is a blatant disregard of the will of the people. The voice of Scotland needs to be heard, and their wishes need to be respected. There is a clear majority in Holyrood of pro-independence MSPs, and a clear democratic mandate for the Scottish Government to hold a second referendum on this issue. The Scottish Parliament has again supported a Section 30 request for the powers to hold another referendum, and only Boris Johnson stands in the way. And aligning with this idiot would be a political suicide. Look at what's happened to the Scottish Labour Party. We must listen to Brexit. We must listen to Scotland. Brexit has changed everything. It doesn't matter whether you support the United Kingdom or whether you support independence. This motion is about the democratic rights of Scottish people living and working in Scotland to have a say in their own future, and we have to support them. It's as simple as that, and I propose this motion. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Stay on a minute. You seconder, who seconded it?
Yeah, that's Robbie. I've just got to change the thing.
Oh, right. Okay, he's with you. They're all panicking
sorry.
in the background that he's not on his own screen. Right, you say his surname for me so I can get it next time, right?
We shall do that, don't worry.
Okay.
Just bear with me, I'm sorry.
No problem.
That's not working. Oh,
is he in the room? Switch seats.
Right. I'll just change his name.
Right, okay.
Sorry. Right, got it.
Yeah, Robbie McIlrath. Nearly. It's okay. It's just mainly if you can get on the screen, that would be great.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, John. Afternoon, Robbie.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Jane. Thank you very much. So nice. We've got pretty poor Wi-Fi up here in the Highlands, so we've got to share.
You need a public ownership. That's what you need.
Indeed we do. Indeed we do.
Okay, over to you, Robbie. Seconded.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Robbie McIlrath of Highland and Mile, rising to a second motion 35. Chair, conference. As we examine this prop, it is crucial to realise it is not a motion to support independence per se, but rather to support the democratic right to exercise that choice. In doing so, we would follow in the footsteps of Unite and Unison. Now, I have no time to rerun the independence debate, but it's important to grasp why there is a demand for independence and who indeed opposes it. After all, if we cannot exercise self-determination, then we truly live in a union of coercion. We should be mindful of how we discussed our relationship with Keir Starmer's Labour Party before. Points were made in these debates, but there was no political alternative to Labour in a first past the post system. However, in Scotland, we have PR, which allows for left of centre alternatives to be chosen, and hence why we have the SNP and the Greens in power. Academic research shows SNP voters identify themselves as left of centre and see independence as a means of protecting a left-wing Scotland. A Scotland which has not voted Tory since 1955 and did not choose 8 out of the last 11 UK governments. This democratic deficit was hammered home by the Thatcher years, Iraq, Brexit, and the experience of the 2014 referendum. That referendum, Alistair Darling, former Labour Chancellor, received a standing ovation at the 2013 Tory conference. In that same campaign, political participation soared as grassroots movements such as the Radical Independence campaign blossomed, with spontaneous meetings for the Yes vote held in the streets and halls throughout the nation. Independence was and is seen as an explosive catalyst for radical change. In opposition with the vested interests of the British state through its pillars of control, such as the BBC, the media, the Daily Mail and all, subservient unionist parties, and secretive bodies such as the Scotland and the Union. This Scotland and the Union is funded by Labour politicians, but funded by a rogues gallery of the corrupt power elite. The independence debate dominates Scottish politics, which means the debate itself is stuck in a transient limbo, which means transformational decisions cannot be taken as the debate is distorted and power is needed denied. Take fire and rehire, which the Scottish Government wishes to ban, but employment law is outside its own remit. Indeed, the present Tory government is now reversing devolved powers through its internal market bill and striking down laws such as putting the United Nations rights of the child into Scottish law. This denial of Scots democracy means that the choice of the Scottish people cannot be ignored anymore. Nor should choices be diluted with the disingenuous office of federalism. The Liberal Democrats during this platform in 2021 and were reduced to a rump of 4 MSPs. In 2021, Anna Sauer tried to portray constitutional politics as an abstract choice, and Labour then fell to its worst ever result, which is saying something. The right of democracy is not abstract and should be respected as such. Otherwise, it's not so much a new deal for change, but more of the same old deal. As the desire for change is quashed by the very vested interests this union should oppose. I urge you to support the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Robbie. Right, I'm going to open motion 35 to debate. So if you want to put your hands up to come into debate, do it now. I just want to check that Dave Jones wanted to come into the debate, or is he just, yeah, I will tell you again after the motion's moved and seconded, then put your hand up, but it's okay, Dave, I will bring you in. Right, is there anyone else who wants to come into the debate? Right, I'll bring Dave Jones in from Wolverhampton. Over to you, Dave.
Hi, Jane. Hi, conference. Dave Jones, Wolverhampton District Branch. Yeah, coming in to oppose this, and oppose it on the grounds of one of the very reasons what the movers say about democracy. Obviously, proud Englishman, absolutely proud Englishman. Support my country, support the Queen, everything. Totally proud Englishman, but I believe in democracy. And, Scottish had a vote on independence, and it didn't go through. So that's that. Same as Brexit, whether we like Brexit or not, Brexit got voted through. You have to stand by democracy. If you challenge that, then to me, it's game over. It's game over. Now, I'm sure that another decade time, there might be another vote on independence, but let's move on. Cheers. We oppose.
Okay, thanks, Dave. On to Des Heemstek, Essex Amal. Over to you, Des.
Okay, thank you, Jane. Our branch opposes this motion, not because we do not support the right of self-determination for the Scottish people, but on the basis of the argument that we do support that right, we do think that it should not be the Essex and Mall branch that determines the union's policy on this, but it should be, in fact, be the members of the CWU in the Scottish region. Likewise, that argument applies to the next motion as well, which we are also opposing on the grounds it should not be individual branches, but the region of Scotland that makes this decision. And that's the reason why we are opposing this motion.
Okay, thanks, Des. Ricky Henderson, Edinburgh. Ricky.
Thanks, Jane. Sorry, just turned my phone off. Yeah, Ricky Henderson, Edinburgh, Dundee and Borders branch, and I wasn't going to take part in this debate. First of all, for the reason that our branch will be abstaining on this motion, and I'll come back to that in a second. And I think the conference should be mindful that the misinformation and distortion can come from many sources, not just unionist or conservative. And I wasn't at the last STUC meeting, and so I don't know what discussions took place within the delegation prior to deciding their voting position, but the accounts I have heard appear to differ slightly from those reported by the mover of the motion, and I'll leave others to debate that later on. As Dave from Wolverhampton has quite rightly pointed out, we did have an independence referendum in Scotland in 2014 with a very clear outcome at that time, and we were under the impression that was a chance in a generation in terms of making that decision. But we accept and realise that people still feel that there's a case to be made for independence in Scotland. But the run up to that debate, both before, during and after, in terms of the referendum in 2014, was both divisive and acrimonious. It split families, it split communities, it split workplaces, and I don't think it's an experience that any of us would care to repeat again quickly. However, we do recognise the strength of feeling on all sides of the debate, and it's something that's been on in Scotland for many years now. So we respect the fact that our members will have differing views on all sides, although it's usually just two sides. I'm afraid it does become very polarised. But we do respect the fact that members will have those very strongly held views. And I understand that nationally we are committed to a member-led consultation on the issue of Scottish independence and the future of Scottish involvement in the UK. And we look forward to engaging in that consultation and that debate. We look forward to engaging with our fellow branches in Scotland, and we'll do so constructively and positively. But for the reasons I've outlined, we will not be voting on motion 35. We will be abstaining. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ricky, for that. I'm going over to Gary Clark, Scotland, number 2. I'm calling for the last indications of anyone who wants to speak. I've got James Chair. Oh, Mark Tripconi is just put his hand up. This is the last call for speakers. James Church has got his up as well. And I'll go do the last call for speakers. Okay, over to you, Gary.
Cheers, Jade. Gary Clark, Branch Secretary, Scotland number 2. Rise and do wholeheartedly support motion 35 in the name of Hannah Mal. I think there's some confusion about this debate. The confusion is not whether we support independence or against independence. is whether we support the right to self-determination. I've taken the point a couple of comrades have spoke previously from Wolverhampton saying Scotland's had their chance. Well, Winston's one kick of the ball is enough. He believes it is, and it's up to the members to decide how we go on this. But on the principle, it should be up to people in Scotland to decide how Scotland's run. It shouldn't be dictated to, and I'd argue there's a Scottish government will request an actual referendum. If Boris Johnson refuses it, what are we going to do? Do you think people in Scotland are going to sit back and take that mildly? As a trade union, we do not sit on the fence and sit on it, but we have to sit on the side of what people in Scotland want and the right of self-determination. And on that, is we have to look, we had the debate the other day there about the Labour Party and our actual attitude towards Labour Party. And I would go on and continue to say that the Labour Party has committed political suicide in Scotland since 2014, but they got involved in the All Together Now campaign to oppose Scottish independence. And since then, what have you seen? You've seen the Scottish Labour Party ending up as almost a non-relevance inside the Scottish debate right now, when they hold one Labour MP for the whole of Scotland. But previously, people who are the age group as myself and older will remember when it came to general elections, Scottish Labour would produce 50 or more MPs. It's down to one MP in Scotland. So if we want to be a relevance in Scotland, we as a trade union should not sit on the sideline. We should follow what other trade unions are doing and supporting a Scottish referendum. And for us to then oppose a Scottish referendum, the signal that will send out to our Scottish members that you do not deserve a vote on how you're going to be run. We should then support the right of self-determination, the right of Scottish people to decide how you're going to be run. And as a trade union, we should 100% support this motion. And if we don't support the motion, the signal that sends out to our Scottish members will take us all back, and there will be a backlash amongst our members if this motion is defeated.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Over to James Church, Doncaster and District. James.
Bear with me, James. Sorry, I'm just. I think I'm opposed to the motion because I do believe it's quite decisive dividing issue in Scotland. I don't think we need that at this moment in time. There's been too much of that. And going back to the SNP, I don't particularly trust them, and never have. I can remember they fetched down the Labour government in 1979. So I'm opposed to it. I'm not opposed to, obviously, people having the right to determine who the government are, but I don't like this at all. I'm against this.
Sorry, I was talking to myself with the mic muted. Mark Coney, Somerset, Devon and Cornwall, and then I'll bring the General Secretary in, Dave Ford, after yourself. Over to you, Mark.
Hi, Mark Tripconey, Somerset, Devon and Cornwall branch, rising to support this motion. I think, as we've heard a lot of the speakers say here and stuff, I think it's absolutely, this isn't an independence question, although as a proud Cornishman and a fellow Celt, I would support that where they're going, because we're all fed up with the Westminster-led Eton boys rule of this country. And I think we have seen a great expression of how things like the COVID could be run when you've got the devolved governments who've done a far better job at this than the Westminster government. But I think the key thing is this is about self-determination and the right of people to make a decision on who rules them and rules them from where. I think we've spent a lot of time on this conference talking about equality and diversity, and allowing people to make their decisions and be respected. And I think this motion is going in that direction. It is in that principle of allowing people to have the right for self-determination and have their wishes respected. So please support this motion. Thank you, conference.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Right, I'm going to bring in Dave Ward, General Secretary on behalf of the NEC. Over to you, Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. And conference, our original position on this motion was to ask the branch to remit, and if not, we were going to ask conference to oppose. Since then, we've had a further meeting and we've agreed to support this particular motion. And I want to explain the reasons why. And I also want to explain the position that we've taken with the Scottish region, which Ricky Henderson referred to. And in doing so, I want to correct, like Ricky did, what the position we took at the STUC. So I want to be clear that we left that to the Scottish delegation to determine the outcome on a motion that wasn't about what position we take on referendum, but whether or not the Scottish government should have the right to hold that referendum. And we recognise now that the STUC, the equivalent of the TUC in Scotland, agreed a similar position to what this motion puts forward, without taking a decision on what way unions should actually vote on that. So for us, there's 2 points that need considering. The first point is that we completely see this question, the motion, not the way, I have to say, John or Rob moved it, because I think they moved it on the basis of a position of taking a position on the referendum, but we support it purely and narrowly on the point that this is a separate question that the wording of the motion sets out. And it is the question as whether or not a democratically elected Scottish government should have the right to hold a further referendum. Now, having looked at that question and following that logic, on balance, and it is on balance, we take the view now that we can support that. And one of the reasons for that is what would happen if we didn't support it. Now the question has been posed. And we could find ourselves as a trade union, if the Scottish government, democratically elected, decide, and it's probably going to be sorted out in court ultimately, opposing that government's right to even hold the referendum. And we think on balance that we shouldn't be in that position of supporting a Tory government in that place. The second point, though, or the final point I want to make, is that on the next motion, we are going to ask conference to oppose that motion. And I want to explain what we actually have discussed with the Scottish region, because we want to have engagement with the members. What's happened, in truth, and I think most people, when we had the Scottish regional meeting a few months back, were really up for approaching this in a different way. And they all recognise the need and the time to have that type of consultation. We'd be very careful and talk to the region and the branches about what type of questions we may ask, but if possible, to try and find that answer in directing where the union goes. The problem is that we called this special virtual general conference before we could actually have that consultation. So, I want to be clear in asking branches to support the motion. We are not taking a position on the referendum itself.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Right, there's obviously been opposition, so I'm going to bring John Carr in. I'm mindful of the time, so I'll already tell you we won't be taking motion 36. This will be the last motion. Okay, so John, if you could come back in, there's been opposition, so you've got the right to reply. You okay, John? Yeah.
I'm fine, thank you. Sorry. Okay, thank you for allowing me to speak again. Number of points that are raised about the issue being divisive. Scotland, that's not an issue that needs to be discussed. That's for the people of Scotland to decide. The Electoral Commission, after the referendum, said it was gold standard, carried out properly, and it was not divisive. Completely agree with Gary from Scotland. Thank you for supporting us. And I also completely agree with Mark. Again, thank you for supporting us. This thing about this generational aspect, that it's only a once in a lifetime thing, that's never been an agreement. That was just a phrase that was used. There was no such commitment in the Edinburgh Agreement. There's no such commission with the Smith Commission. And in the Good Friday Agreement, it was generally agreed that 7 years counts as a political generation. So I don't know what that speaker was talking about. So basically, oh yeah, I did thank Mark. Yeah, thank you, Mark, for supporting us. And I move this motion. Again, sorry.
Sorry, John. You obviously haven't had a right to reply, have you, at a conference? If there's opposition to your motion, you get a right to reply to come back in.
Yeah, sorry.
So you'll thank the General Secretary for supporting it as well.
Oh, of course, yes, I do. Thank you for changing your position. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, John. Right, I'm going to put motion 35 to you. So can you do the vote? As I say, the timetable, we were due to finish motions at 10:02. So 5 minutes is not enough time to do another motion. So that's where we're going to finish on the business in terms of the last section. I'll leave you for a couple of minutes doing the vote. And then I'm going to hand over to Dave Ward to do the closing remarks, and then I'll close conference right at the end. But a couple of minutes to get your votes in, and then I'll go over to Dave. Right, while everyone's voting, I don't know whether, Dave, do you and Tony both want to say something while we're got a bit of in between time? So I don't know whether Tony wants to say a few words. And then Dave, after I've got the result in, you speak. Tony?
No, James, Dave's doing a summing up at the end.
Right, okay. I'm just trying to fill in because I'm conscious I don't want Dave to start and then have to interrupt him in terms of the vote. So I'll do mine. As I said, it's a thanks to everyone who's organised the conference, the staff at headquarters, the interpreters who have been on each day. I hope for yourselves as delegates, you've enjoyed it. I mean, but you all know in some way, it's a good way of being able to do some business, but it's not the ideal way. But I think we've managed it really well in terms of getting some high-level strategy passed and also to get debate from yourselves and democracy. The other thing is, it is noticeable that there is more participation from people that maybe we don't normally see at conference on these platforms. And that is noticeable. So I would hope that when branches are considering when we do go to conferences, that they bring through people with them. For some people and some branches, that may mean people come down for a couple of days and then you switch delegations. Or it may mean which, I mean, I think our union's brilliant at that. You bring a larger delegation and then you switch on the floor. So no one's getting sent home, but it's a bigger delegation and a wider spread, especially as people want to be engaged in the union and want to be active, as well as active in the workplace. They want to be active as a representative of this union. So we need to look at that in terms of moving forward. But it's definitely been brilliant in terms of the contributions and a big learning curve for people, but in some ways a friendly learning curve. Some people think virtual calls are harder, but I tell you, getting up in front of 1,000 people that you can see face to face can be quite nerve-wracking. But this is a good way of being able to sort of gain confidence. Right, I've now got the vote, so I'm going to stop my chattering of how marvellous I think you all are, and I want to see you all at conference to give you the vote on the final motion of the virtual conference. And it's motion 35. 161,209 votes were cast. For the motion, 103,841. Against the motion, 43,162. Therefore, motion 35 has been carried. Okay. Again, thank you all for how you've behaved, how you've dealt with it, and dealt with the virtual conference, and I'll see other people throughout. Ruth, you've got your hand up. Is that for any reason or just that? Are you okay, Ruth? Right, no, I'm not. Ruth Meadows, do you want to speak? Can you let Ruth in and then I'll go to Dave?
I just want to ask, you saying about more people talking in this conference and it's been really great. Does that mean when we go to conference next year, it will be a hybrid where people who can't attend due to family or other commitments can still actually participate online? Right.
Ruth, there's no commitment on that. At the moment, it will be face-to-face, but obviously, and I know Dave might touch on it, we will look at things. But what I'm asking for, I know some people can't be in everything, so they can't travel, but the branches could certainly bring a variation of delegates if they want to. That's within their gift, and that's what I'm commenting on. And I'm sure over the next 3 months, there will be a talk about how do we do conference next year. But it is face-to-face. It is based on the delegate strength as normal, but I'm asking branches to be mindful that a good spread of people does make for a good mix of conference. Okay, I'm now going to hand over to Dave for closing remarks. Over to you, Dave.
And first of all, I think the delegates should put their hands together for our president, who's handled the conference in an exceptional way. These are not easy conferences to deal with, and James handled that really, really well. So well done, James. Similarly, also, I'm sure you'll want to offer your best wishes to Karen Rose, our vice president, who unfortunately was taken ill just before the conference. And I know we all wish Karen best of health and get back to work soon. I'm sure she will. I do want to just mention a few of the people who have been in headquarters and put some names to you for some of the people who have got the conference moving. So we've got Hayley in the back room behind the screens here, who's managed the Zoom event and has done all the unmuting and muting and whatnot. We've got Dawn up in my office, who's been assisting the SOC, are also up in our office, and they've done a great job as well, the SOC, and then they can vacate my office fairly soon, hopefully after the conference. We've got Angela and April, who have run the voting app, the platform, and making sure that all the information and the training that was needed before that was done. We've got Amy and Marcia for helping us in the background liaising between all the various parts of the rooms that are being used at CWU headquarters. And of course, we've got all of our policy advisors and PAs and secretarial staff who have been in the background working hard as well. We've got Liam, you can't see him, our head of political strategy, who's been managing the camera angles. He's been moonlighting at the same time, doing the camera work. And we've got Chris Webb, who's earned a good reputation now as a DJ as well. And he's been keeping us all connected, basically, which is what he does in a brilliant way. I want to just say as well, good friend and colleague, it was a year today that we lost our NEC retired member, Brian Lee, who sadly passed away. And I know the branch have got something on where they're remembering Brian. And, you know, I wish we could have been there, but we can't because of the conference, obviously. So, look, let me just summarise really where we are. When we agreed to have this conference, we were really keen to ensure that the democracy of the union was maintained. And I think you've all done that in a great way. The contributions, I think, have been excellent. I think the debate's been of a high quality. And I agree with the point that's been made that there are a lot of more new people that have been able to join this particular conference. And we thank you all for the way that you've conducted yourself during the conference. We also said at the start of it that it was a conference where we had to really think carefully about the future of the CWU and the future of our movement. And I think the two are entwined. And we believe, and I believe passionately, that we have a future as a standalone union and that the rest of the movement actually needs the CWU to be a standalone union, because we got lots and lots of challenges. And as I said in my opening address, I do feel at the moment that our movement is a little bit disorientated, that with the Labour Party in the current direction that it's going, it doesn't seem to us to be able to handle at the moment. I hope that changes, and I hope we can get rid of Johnson as soon as possible. But we're going to need to do something different. And what this conference was about was, as well as all the motions, great motions and issues that we've debated today, it was about offering a direction and leadership in how we tackle these huge problems, many of which have been there for decades, about growing inequality, but have definitely been heightened by the reality of COVID and how it's flipped our lives upside down. We need to build collectivism in the union movement across society like never before. And, you know, you've endorsed that strategy. 4 key areas of work that we're going to continue to move forward on are really important for our future. Just want to remind you of those 4 key areas. Our anti-racism work is coming into the mainstream work of our union. It's for trade unions to take on the cause of fighting against racism, for our own members, and for everything we believe in, all of the values that we hold dear. And we've taken a decision in this conference that we're not going to talk to ourselves about this anymore. We're going to actually start to engage people internally in the union and externally. On our relationship with Labour, we've reinforced the direction that we've set out for some time, but we've done it in a really meaningful way. We've set out a strategy where we can start to influence the direction of Labour where we're not happy, by going to people in regions who have been elected and getting behind them with a connection between our industrial and political strategies and making change happen on the ground. On our New Deal for Working People, you know, the CWU has led this campaign, and I acknowledge, you know, a couple of points that were made. Well, yeah, we've been at it a long time, but don't underestimate, the movement has never in the history of the movement done what we're trying to achieve at the moment. And I believe we can actually bring the trade union movement together to campaign more collectively, and ultimately to take action in bringing society back together and changing things. We've also talked about recruitment and organising. And for the first time in the history of this union, we are now at long last agreed that we're going to run a central union campaign, a cross-union campaign, where we bring the strengths of everybody together to do two things. One, make sure that we can increase the density of our members in the organised companies, and two, come back and have a proper consultation on the strategy that we need to carry forward with your input on how we get out there and how we actually organise workers across the sectors that we work in. These are all huge challenges. And I want to finish by just saying carrying the motions is always good, but the work that needs to be done to actually make this strategy work and to get into a place where every single one of us prioritise the building of collectivism in and out of the workplace, the building of a social movement that brings change, that's going to take us all to want to move out of our comfort zones. It's going to take us to understand and support absolutely the one union concept. It's time now for us to show the rest of the movement how we believe in solidarity and in the principles of this trade union. And I know you're with us on that. And we know we couldn't have a better group of activists to take that cause on. So we really do thank you for the way that you've conducted yourself. We've got a strategy, we've got a direction. Let's go out and make change happen. Thanks very much, everybody.